morning, everyone, and welcome to Philo for Thought's March 2021 Career Advisory Seminar. I'm going to introduce you to our co-moderators, Alexandra Leotopoulos and Andi Rustani, who are going to welcome you and introduce our guest speakers today.
Good morning, everyone. Like Chris said, my name is Alexandra Leotopoulos, and I am the president of the Ikaros Hellenic Club, as well as programming director at Philo for Thought. And co-moderating with me again today is Andi, who is our recruitment director at Philo for Thought and a medical assistant at Lexington Medical Associates. Welcome, Andi. I will now introduce our humanities panelists, and then Andi will introduce our STEM panelists. So first we have Dimitri Papakostas. Dimitri Papakostas has been working at Bloomberg for 11 years, where among other responsibilities, he runs the market specialist group across all assets classes for the Americas. He previously worked for major financial institutions, primarily at JP Morgan Chase, heading the FX Derivative Structuring Group and the FX Sales Group. At other financial institutions, he ran FX options and precious metal option trading desks, FX structuring and FX sales. Dimitri teaches a futures and options course at City University's Colin Powell School for Civic and Global Leadership to both graduate and undergraduate students, and recently published the definitive book on FX options, and the fascinating ways individuals engage with the market, with co-author Francesco Tonin, Foreign Exchange Options and Risk Management, Market Dynamics, Models, and Human Behavior. This is available online. Our next speaker is Michael Offerteague, who is in his 10th season as the head fencing coach for Columbia University. During his 9 years, the team's combined record is 386-86. Michael Offerteague is the 2016 USA Fencing Coaches Association Varsity Coach of the Year and Women's Ivy Coach of the Year in 2015, 2019, and 2020. Michael has been volunteering as the chairman of the New York Athletic Club fencing program since 2007. During that time, the NIAC has won 21 individual and 25 team national championships, fielded 51 USA World Team members, 11 Olympians, winning 2 bronze, 4 silver, and 8 gold World Team medals and 1 bronze Olympic team medal. In 2019, the NIAC qualified 7 of the 24 USA World Team members. Michael was on the USA Fencing Board of Directors from 2014 to 2016. He was the 2012 USA Olympic fencing coach for modern pentathlon and served as the 2009 USA Women's Epi World Team coach. Before entering the coaching world, he was a senior sales associate at Kinterra, an online fundraising platform revolutionizing the world of fundraising in the late 1990s, and a senior sales associate at ASI, selling enterprise database systems to association and nonprofits. Next, we have John Papaspanos. John Papaspanos specializes in domestic and international project and acquisition financings, tax equity transactions, restructurings, and debt equity financing transactions involving energy and infrastructure projects and companies. He is a member of the New York and New Jersey Bar Associations, representing private equity sponsors, developers, independent power producers, public and private companies, lenders, financial institutions, and investors on complex and novel project financing, including renewable energy, conventional energy, commodities financing, and infrastructure transactions. He has also represented major financial institutions on non-recourse supply and offtake arrangements and financing transactions pertaining to crude oil, refined products, and accounts receivable. Our next speaker is Tamika Tampolidis, who is a professional development career counselor, adjunct professor of public speaking at the University of Kentucky, and the staff advisor for their Forte Club, which prepares women seeking careers in business. Her specialties include communicative outcomes, assessments, advisement, and empowerment of students, young professionals, and future leaders. She is a longstanding mentor for Feel for Thought and National Hellenic Students Association and hopes to join UK's Women's Forum Board, which engages future leaders, addresses challenges that women face, and recognizes success in the workplace. Next, and finally, our last speaker for the humanities panel is Chris Salbudis, who is a career coach, founding CEO of Feel for Thought, professor of philosophy, comparative literature, communications, and environmental studies. She is also the administrative manager and student coordinator at the Columbia University Center for Genome Technology and Biomolecular Engineering, and the former assistant dean of liberal arts and sciences at St. John's University. Welcome, humanities panelists. Now, Andi will present the STEM panelists.
Okay. Representing the STEM panelists, we first have Dr. Lorraine Chrysomales Veliciadis, who graduated from Barnard College of Columbia University with a Bachelor's of Arts in Biology, and then went on to earn her medical degree from New York Medical College in 1990. She completed her residency in obstetrics and gynecology in 1994 and did a fellowship in maternal fetal medicine at Columbia University Vagelos College of Physicians and Surgeons. Following her formal training, she worked for 11 years as an assistant clinical professor of obstetrics and gynecology at Columbia University Medical Center, and she provided a wide range of care for high-risk pregnant patients. In 2005, she opened her own private practice on the Upper East Side and is affiliated with Northwell Health. Dr. Veliciadis is the recipient of many awards and honors and has been involved with many societies. She has been a member of the Hellenic Medical Society of New York since 1987 and is currently the second vice president on the executive board. She also started the Young Initiative Project and actively recruits young members and is involved in community outreach. Among her multiple publications, she authored an article on the first known case of lymphocytic leukemia in pregnancy, and has contributed numerous abstracts on induction of labor and on perinatal complications in women of advanced maternal age with donor eggs. She has been a guest on ABC Network's Good Morning America, on Actina FM radio, and has been quoted in various publications, including Cosmopolitan, Glamour, Modern Bride, Shape, and Parents magazines. In 2013, the Barnard College Alumni Association awarded her the Distinguished Award for service for her outstanding mentorship of young women and dedication of the Barnard community. Today, she continues to support and empower the future generation of women leaders entering the medical profession. A native New Yorker, she resides in Manhattan with her husband, Peter, and their two daughters, Nicole and Victoria. It's an honor to have you today. Next, we have Michael Evangelopoulos, who is currently a PhD candidate in the Department of Biomedical Engineering at Northwestern University. His research focuses on the development of immunotherapies for the treatment of cancer. Previously, Michael worked as a biomedical engineer at the Houston Methodist Hospital, where he was able to study the use of nanoparticles in cancer treatment. Michael received a Bachelor of Science in Biomedical Engineering from the University of Houston. And lastly, we have Elpida Vilmajos. In 2017, she was awarded a Bachelor's of Science in Human Physiology and has 2 minors in Spanish and Public Health. Afterwards, she went and got her Master's in Public Health and Health Policy and Management from Columbia University, graduating in 2019. She is now a second-year law student at Suffolk University Law School, concentrating in health law and set to graduate in May 2022. During undergrad, she participated as a research assistant in multiple research projects, focusing on issues like ACA reform and the opioid epidemic. She also worked at an NGO named Prolepsis in Athens, Greece. The 2 projects she focused on were MIG Healthcare, a program geared towards minimizing inequalities and improving the integration of vulnerable migrants and refugees into local communities and hospitals, and Dia Trophy, a food aid and health nutrition program for underserved Greek communities. During her time at Columbia, she worked as a student consultant for a variety of healthcare organizations under professor supervision. She also conducted research focusing on country food policies and their relationship to non-communicable diseases. The large New York City Greek community also gave her the opportunity to join Philo for Thought, HALC, and THI. The summer before law school, she worked as a legislative aide for Representative Denise Garlick of the MA House of Representatives. While there, she conducted research and drafted memoranda on topics like the jewel ban, safe injection sites, and the Food is Medicine program. In law school, Apita is a member of the Journal of Health and Biomedical Law and will be taking on the role of symposium editor for her third year. She also participated in the National Health Law Moot Court team and is a member of the Health Law and Biomedical Society. Her internships have included working for the Boston Public Health Commission, Natalia Linos for Congress, and doing research for Professor Mark Rodman. Her interests in the healthcare space includes healthcare reform, food policy, and data privacy. These three speakers make up our STEM panelists.
So now we will move everyone into either the STEM panel, or if you're in the humanities, you'll stay in the main room. So if you could tell us in the chat where you would like to go, we will move you to the specific room, and then we will start our prepared panel discussion. Okay, so we will start by having our humanities panelists give us an overview of each of their academic programs. So we'll start with Dimitri. Could you tell us a little bit more about your background and any types of programs besides the MBA that are in the business realm?
That are generally, I would consider in the business realm. Yeah, so my background is, well, I intended to be more academic. I went for my MBA mostly because I didn't like what I was doing, which is not a good reason to go for an MBA in general. So that's a discussion to have. Then pursued a career on a trading floor for a financial institution. And so I wanted to go for my PhD. I was at NYU Stern School for a PhD in finance. But frankly, on a trading floor, especially at that time when I was going, degrees were superfluous to say the least. It was not a, and still isn't, I think, to a large extent, a place where they're valued. So that's kind of my background. As I look at, you know, what's available to students today, it really is a much different landscape. For one thing, I won't even say cost, the massive investment, the financial investment to get an advanced degree these days is just, I mean, I guess college is astronomical, but you know, advanced degrees are just ridiculous in my estimation, in terms of the sort of the cost that's involved. And especially if you have to sort of borrow to do it, it's just a huge burden. But having said that, I think it's very important for, you know, young people to consider much more carefully about why they're doing it, right? If they have an understanding of where they'd like to end up, there are more specialized ways to do it. So for example, if you're kind of looking business in general, an MBA I think is very good, and depending on the school, only because from a marketing perspective, it's a good thing to consider. But if you, for example, into finance and specifically say the asset management side of things, right? You know, you want to become a portfolio manager. You love analyzing stocks, and you know you want to, you know, ideal job is to be portfolio manager at Vanguard or Fidelity or what have you. Then I'm not sure an MBA is the way you want to go. You probably want to, you know, take a CFA and be a certified financial analyst, right? This is a very difficult three-part sort of program that is rigorous and really you need to get it anyway if you're going to be if that's what you're going after. If you're looking to become, you know, a sort of a personal financial advisor, that's kind of your area of expertise. Again, rather than an MBA, I would probably focus more on a CFP as a degree. You know, it's not as rigorous as an MBA, but it would serve you better, I think, in that context. The other thing that's really, you know, in terms of degrees available, that I think some schools offer a combination of MBA, JD degrees, Juris Doctorate, and you know, our society is incredibly litigious, and I'm sure John will attest to it. you know, having a law degree combined with business know-how is absolutely critical in someone that's looking to sort of be in a broader finance business environment rather than something very specific that they know they like to do. So that's kind of the topography, I think, Alexandra, in general. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. So being that you just mentioned the JD MBA, let's go into John. John, could you tell us a little bit about the JD program?
Sure. So, I mean, just take a step back. There are like 3 major legal degrees that you can obtain. And here in the United States, we don't have a system like in the UK where you can study law as an undergraduate. So we have 4 years of undergraduate study, and then you go on to graduate school to study law. So typically, the JD program is like, you know, the gold standard. So it's a 3-year program. It's basically 1 or 2 years of intense classroom study, and then the 3rd year you can be participant in a clinic, or you can do an apprenticeship. And the other 2 degrees are less common. So the second one is the LLM, which is a Master of Laws, and that's just an advanced postgraduate academic degree. And typically people get an LLM after they get their JD, or a lot of foreign lawyers who wish to come to the United States get some additional training and studying under an American law professor in a U.S. law school, and they want to have like a stamp of approval, really, for when they come back to their home country. They have like additional legitimacy, per se, right, by studying here in the United States, getting the LLM degree. The other is the Doctor of Juridical Science, the SJD, and that's typically for academics. So for someone who wants to be a professor, someone wants to do legal study in a nonprofit organization, and you want to be a thought leader, you do the SJD. It's almost like a PhD in law. So for the JD, like Dimitri mentioned, it's extremely expensive, and the opportunity, it's about like, say, 150,000, typically 160,000 for the full 3-year program. And the opportunity cost is very high as well. So during those 3 years, you could be working, you know, say you make 50,000 on average, it's another 150,000 opportunity cost. And I just want to reiterate, you know, debt is like basically prison. Student debt is like Alcatraz. It's always going to follow you. It's very, you know, burdensome in your life. If you choose to take that path, you have to be very confident that's what you want to do. And like Dimitri mentioned as well, it's great to couple the law degree with a business degree, because being a lawyer today is much different than at any time before. It's highly competitive, and you really have to know the industry and the clients, you know, that are engaging in that industry very well to be effective counsel. Otherwise, you're practicing in a vacuum. You can have all the legal knowledge in the world, but if you don't know what the client needs or what the risks are, you're not much good. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, John. Now we'll go to Michael to give us a little bit of an overview of the sports management program.
Sure. So my background, it's cool, Dimitri, you said NYU Stern School of Business. So I graduated undergraduate there in 1994. And my whole, you know, focus was I was going to be in the business world, which I was after college. But the passion was always sports and fencing. That was the sport that I played. So, you know, the pandemic came and everybody's looking to do different things. And so I'm like, let me go back to school 25 years later. So, you know, I applied and right now I'm part-time. There's both full-time and part-time. What I find with my classmates, you have everyone from someone graduating from college that just has an interest in sports to, you know, probably the average age is around 30. You have individuals that were in finance, individuals even in law, that once again, the passion is sports. So they want to take what they have been studying and put it into their passion. And, you know, I've been in it now. It's just my 2nd semester and loving it.
That's good to hear. And I mean, at least in this country, you could go back to school at any time and do what you're passionate about. Next, Tamika will tell us a little bit about her area of expertise. Tamika?
Sure, I'm happy to be here and see all of you. So I predominantly work in the career services realm, and essentially assist particularly our honor students who are going to be entering into medical field, law, and business. Those are the top 3 populations that I work with, but we also work with a variety of others. And so it's essentially kind of preparing them for life after graduation, connecting them with internship, co-op opportunities, and then of course preparing those applications for those professional degrees. And then in addition to that, I also teach for the College of Business, strategic business communications, and they get to learn how to work as a team, come up with like a company, how to run that company. And so it's a lot of life skills that, as you could imagine, college students probably wouldn't be thinking about at that time. So we try to prepare them early. And so what's cool about my job is I get to kind of learn the industries that everyone's been kind of talking about and learning about these degrees in order to help my students prepare them. So it's a fun job, but that's essentially kind of what I do and what my background is in.
Thank you. And lastly, Chris will tell us a little bit about education and the other programs that you can get with a PhD. Chris, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so actually, a lot of the programs that I work with involve either education in the traditional sense of going in and teaching, whereas other programs that I work with involve interdisciplinary studies, which do cross over between the humanities and then also the STEM areas, which is reflected in my own career background, but then also it's just fun. It's nice to know. And I think part of it is being Greek and always asking questions and, why is this, why is that? And so just naturally I fell into this interdisciplinary role. Also, the training usually at the undergraduate level is a little bit less traditional. So a lot of times students want to focus on a specific subject area, but then they don't know where are they going to go after that. So then the answer sometimes for them is to get advanced certification in their discipline, a master's degree in the discipline, or to go into interdisciplinary studies where they can cross between what they majored in and what they minored in and then find their passion. Interdisciplinary studies is also very helpful where like right now in the current climate, because a lot of people have lost their jobs and are trying to rebrand themselves, reinvent themselves, remember what it is that they did before the frustration of COVID. And so they're reconnecting with their passions, which is really amazing, but now they have to get some training. So that's basically what I help do. I help research for the individuals who are looking for new training, the individuals who are looking for new opportunities and how to connect with them. And sometimes it requires a bit of training. Sometimes it's just a confidence thing. But that's basically what I do with the interdisciplinary. Versus education, there are a lot of fields in education that don't just involve getting a teaching degree. You could be an educational administrator. You could go, like all the individuals who run our schools have EDDs instead of PhDs. Whereas, and we can talk about that a little bit more if there's a related question. If not, we do have on the event page a list of comparative degree programs so that you can see what's the difference between the different programs as well.
Thank you, Chris. So our next question is, what benefits have you experienced from earning or working towards this degree? We'll start with Dimitri.
Well, there's a marketing aspect to it, if I can be sort of blunt, right? And so not so much at the beginning, I think, of one's career, but later on, it depending on what kind of a position you're looking for and to what extent it has some element of qualifications as a base. It's good to be able to say, yes, I've got my MBA. It's a bit of a generational thing as well, I think, in terms of how it's valued. In terms of the specifics, for me specifically, I played too much foosball in undergraduate, so it was an opportunity for me to say, I can actually do well academically if I don't go to the pub too often, and so it helped me discipline myself in an academic environment. It also opened up, for me at the time, I was not very familiar with the business world more broadly. So it really opened my mind up a little bit in terms of what's out there and the different the different aspects of business, right? Because we say business, it's such an amazingly broad swath of different disciplines and depth and breadth of what you can do. So that's basically it for me. In terms of the specifics, in terms of say, I learned how to do ABC in terms of functional knowledge. I think especially today, if you're going to school because you want to learn how to analyze financial statements or whatever it is, you're better off, spending, a few hours on YouTube than going and paying, $100,000. So it is the context. And most importantly, frankly, it's today, I believe even more so, it's the connections. And in that, and so, to the extent you have that choice as a student, as a young person, I would strongly encourage you to first get a job. If your choice is between, I've got this job, but I can go for my MBA, I would say get the job first, because then you'll know, then you'll get the most out of your MBA. Many young people today don't have that choice, of course, so that's a different story. But yeah, so it's not so much the technical knowledge. I think for me, it's much more experiential.
See, it's funny that you say that, because I've always been told the same thing: go work and then you'll figure out what you want to do. But like you said, in this climate, jobs aren't readily available for everyone. So a lot of people are choosing to go back to school. So I guess a follow-up question for you would be, would you recommend someone starting part-time, seeing what's out there, and also trying to work? Or would you recommend just strictly focusing on finding work and then instead of spending so much money on a graduate program?
Yeah, if you, to me, I think only because, look, as Michael said, if you've got a passion, you know what you want to do, get the degree, focus it to exactly what you want to do. There's no question about it. I suspect, the majority of people, although Chris will probably tell me if I'm right about that, I suspect a significant portion of people, say 80% of the people, they kind of, they don't really know what they want. They might, they're kind of like, business, you make money, right? Isn't that where you get rich? Yeah, that's what I want to do. I want to get rich. Yeah, that's what I want to do. And that's just not. So if you can work part-time, absolutely, because it'll just focus the mind. And then if you say, I can do this for the next 20 years, then it becomes then you go to school and you're like, okay, no, I want to learn this, and I'm going to pick up on this project, and I'm going to take this initiative, and I'm going to get involved in this, and I want to get to know that professor because that professor has a specialty that I'm interested in, right? If you don't know, if you haven't sort of refined or fine-tuned that focus and that passion, it could be a bit of a waste.
Thank you. We'll go to Michael next for the same question. What benefits have you experienced from earning this degree or pursuing it now that you're in your second semester, like you said before?
Sure. And, I feel the benefits are going to be different for everyone. And so, as Dimitri said, I definitely agree. The connections, my experience right now, when I was originally applying, a lot of the individuals that I reached out for recommendations for my application were like, Michael, why do you want to bother with this? You have a 4-year-old son, you have a family, you're the #1 fencing team. Like, why do you even want to do this? But it's like, well, because I had curiosity, right? So I had curiosity. And so like my professor now in my class, he was president of CBS Sports for 20 years, Neil Pilson. So here I am in class where people are looking at me like, wow, this guy won national championships, he did all these things, but yet I feel like that rookie, learning and eager, the hungry puppy, right? So, what I've been experiencing is the book that I always wanted to read. There was a book assigned in class called Grit by Angela Duckworth. I always wanted to read it. I saw her TED Talk. Well, it was assigned in class, so I read it. And then she came to our class and discussed it, and I got to ask questions, Angela Duckworth about grit, something very, important to our team. So it's like have access now to all the individuals that I always wished I could reach out to. And if anything, it pushed me, and it's been helping me right now when you say benefits on how I'm managing the team during these times. So it's just like this on Zoom. And my classes had a lot of guest speakers. And so by kind of being in these classes, reaching out for experts to get speakers, it helped push me where after reading Grit, one of the big things was spelling bees and how these young kids would do very well in spelling bees. So I researched and searched and found the 1997 spelling bee champion from New York and invited her to our team meeting, right? And basically we were comparing fencing to spelling bee training. So the main benefit is really just the access to all these other like-minded, eager, hungry puppies, I call them, right? And established individuals to get new ideas.
Man, Michael, you should be the poster child for why people should, why college is wasted on the young and people should go to college when they're ready.
Yeah. And it's when I tell people like, yeah, I just turned 50, they're like, what? You turned 50? I'm like, yeah. And, being around all of you, you keep me young. You keep me honest, right?
I mean, the follow-up question to that is, now that you're pursuing your degree, what jobs do you hope to get with having the accelerated degree? I know that a lot of people often do go back to school to get a better degree to pursue, to further their careers. So in your realm, what would that entail?
Sure. And so like right now, in the fencing world, having the Columbia head coaching job is the dream job, right? Being in New York, fencing is like, New York is one of the capital of fencing. So it's like, it is one of the dream jobs. And maybe there's 4 or 5 others out there, but who knows how much longer I will be a coach. I joke around and say, yeah, for the rest of my life, but maybe there's an opportunity as an athletic director. So not just overseeing fencing, but overseeing, 31 sports or more sports. But it's definitely opening my eyes, whether it's going to be for another position or to enhance and make my current position even better, right? It's opening my eyes to things I never knew about sports. I never knew things about the NFL and NBA and all the different contracts and the way it works and different things like that. So it's opening my eyes, and I'm still in the beginning stages. So maybe if I'm back here in 2 years, which is going to be halfway of my 4-year degree, I might be able to answer that a little bit better.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch gears. This question is kind of similar to what I just asked, but I'm going to tailor it more towards John. So John, how did you know that law was the right degree, a JD was the right degree for you? And how did you meet your personal and professional goals through attaining this degree?
Sure. So I think I wasn't, inherently a legal mind. I think, by nature, I was more of like the gregarious type. I wanted to have human connection. I wanted to, do business. I grew up in my family's, business, family restaurant. And I wasn't really the serious, cool-headed, logical thinker. And I think just by happenstance, I got into law school. Basically, I was flipping pancakes one day, and then, my high school teacher's husband was a business manager of a major law firm in DC. He's like, this guy seems very energetic, seems sharp. Like, let me give him a shot at being an intern at a big law firm. And that's how I got my break. Literally, I didn't even know what I was getting myself into. And they were all lobbyists in the shop, in the legal firm. So I was like, this is really cool. And I want to be a lobbyist. I want to talk to athletes or politicians and help them, achieve their goals. And then I went to law school, and I was like, it was a little bit of a bait and switch. I was like, this is totally not fun. I was like, this is boring, and vast amounts of reading in the very beginning, and then once I got adjusted and I, changed my worldview a little bit, I really enjoyed, like Michael was saying, I was very curious, and I very much enjoyed learning about the law and legal concepts, all the different, legal issues that were being raised in cases from history and the cutting edge issues. And I realized how relevant it is. Like you see everything through the prism of a legal training, right? And it's not just legal cases, but it's also conflict and processes and, government and even philosophical ideas. You pull open, Aristotle, the politics, the dialogues of Plato, and you'll see that legal training and legal analysis is philosophical, syllogisms. It's philosophical understanding. And I found it really interesting. And, I changed as a byproduct of my legal training. I changed as a person, and people who knew me, like, before law school versus after law school, they see like a different person. So it really did change my, my framework. But I think the benefits that I accrued is obviously analytical skills, work ethic, discipline. Like Michael said, grit. Grit is probably the most important one, where you fall on your face every time. You read a case, you're like, I have no idea what this means. I don't understand, the reasoning of the judge. You just always feel like inadequate, like you're not smart enough. And you fall down, you get back up again, and eventually, it's like boot camp. Eventually, you overcome, and you get smart enough, and you pick up on things after a long, sustained period of effort. And I think, like, you have to analyze vast tracts of information, so you have to prioritize. You have to be very good with time management and efficiency. So when you are in the classroom and the teacher asks you a question, you have to have the basic principles of the case down, the basic facts of the case down. You can't get like lost in the details, right? Because you're not gonna be equipped to, on the fly, give an analytical response to the law professor's questions. And another part of it is self-confidence. So when they say, like, I think Aristotle Onassis said, like, the good captain can be determined during a storm. Only during a storm can you really know who's well equipped to lead the crew and to get the ship to sail through the storm, right? And that's the same thing with life, and the same thing with legal career. In that time of stress, where your back's against the wall, and it's high stakes game, and you don't have time, you have to make a decision, you have to understand what to do, and in terms of advancing your client's interest. That's where the training comes in, as a law school graduate. And then when you're in the law firm, those years of going up the learning curve, understanding patterns, understanding solutions to very multifaceted issues with multiple stakeholders. So I think that's another thing, self-confidence. And the last thing is just being a good counselor, learning how to advise people in their disputes and in their processes with business interaction. So I know, like, if you've seen Queen's Gambit for the Netflix watchers, the show about chess. Imagine somebody playing a chess match, and the lawyer is the guy on the sideline, whispering into the ear of the chess player and saying, like, okay, so if you do that, that's what's going to happen. He wants to do that move because of X reason. You have to respond with Y, and you have to understand both of the players' strategies, what their interests are, what the risks are, and you have to be able to foresee, the next 2-3 steps. And you have to always be cognizant of, like, the negative contingencies, right? Like, what could go wrong? You're always thinking what could go wrong. Unfortunately, it doesn't really, it's not conducive to optimistic mentality, but that's what we get paid for, right? If everything is good and jolly, there's not much good use for a lawyer, right? If you trust everyone, everything comes out perfect in a business interaction. So essentially, you're like the counselor, so you have to very much listen to the client, understand what they know as their options. Are they truly well informed about their alternatives? You have to give them, the proper data points so they can make an informed decision, right? And to be fully wide-eyed as to the risks that they're taking whenever they make a move. And then that takes a lot of work, right? Over the years, you have to pick up not just legal knowledge, but emotional intelligence, and you have to understand what's material. And that takes a lifetime. The craft of law, it takes, a decade at least to get good at it, I would say. So it's a work in process.
Thank you. And I know that you've co-authored the Arete article, which I started reading because I was a prospective law student, and I quickly realized that's not what I want to do. But could you tell us a little bit more about that, and explain why you think it's important to know in advance before pursuing this degree, whether you want to practice law or not?
Sure. So, I mean, the IDT, very briefly, it's a pamphlet, like-minded Greek American lawyers came together. They said, we get asked these like same questions a million times. How do I get into law school? What law school to go to? How do I prepare? Let's just distill all that information in a PDF, and then we circulate it, and we share our knowledge and our experience about the process for other people. And that's how the IDT series was born, right? For the legal edition. I think the decision to go to law school is a very difficult one. And you should, I think, take your time in deciding. I mean, just briefly, I would mention, do you have, like, I didn't ask myself whether I have the wherewithal, like, as my natural baseline, whether I'm like apt to be a lawyer or not. I didn't really ask that question. I just jumped and then thought after the fact. That was a risky move. In hindsight, I probably should have like been a little bit more careful, and I adjusted. But some people, it's overwhelming. A lot of the pressures, and it's just too much. And people like quit law all the time. And I think psychologically, it's very, it can be very burdensome. So you want to ask yourself whether you're like thick-skinned enough to do the whole process. And then last, like, is it worth the investment? You really, really have to be sure that you want to do this for a long period of time, unless you have some sort of scholarship. Like, you don't want to commit yourself to this path because it's difficult to change paths. It's costly, but it's very fruitful and very rewarding if you do choose the practice of law. And you don't have to be in a like corporate law firm. You do, nonprofit. You can be in academics. You can do a number of things, family law. But at the end of the day, you really have to know thyself. The ancient Greek maxim. If you don't know yourself, don't make a decision. Wait it off. Wait a little bit. Go to intern at a small shop. Understand a little bit what it means to in a daily life to be a lawyer, and make a decision after that.
Thank you. So transitioning to our next question, since so many people are applying to post-bachelor degree programs, what would you recommend to help make our applications stand out to the admissions committee? So I'm going to start with Tamika. What is your top tip?
That's a great question, especially right now with COVID. We as career counselors really had to kind of see what are a lot of employers looking for as far as post-bac kind of degrees. Employers, we had to look and see what really needs to stand out. So it's a little bit different with COVID because now the requirement is it's less on kind of the scores on ACT, SAT, so forth, and any kind of testing that you need to do, and more on that personal statement and making sure that you know exactly what it is that you really want and whether or not the degree that you're pursuing is going to be the best fit for you. So it's really just like how John mentioned, knowing yourself is truly going to help you understand and see whether a program is the right fit. And then also being able to see what the program offers and how you will contribute as a student in that program. So it's definitely a lot of soul searching and kind of seeing, and it depends on the post, degree that you are pursuing, what the requirements are. But really kind of understanding what are your goals, what's your mission, and then how do you know that this program is really going to fit your ultimate degree kind of pursuits, whether that's going into research afterwards, whether it's going and working. So I think it just kind of depends on the program, but really just making sure you understand yourself and how you portray that in that personal statement.
Thank you. Chris, do you want to add anything to that as a fellow career counselor?
Well, I have to say, I've been helping a lot of students work with their applications this semester. And one of the things that people should connect with in their essays is a personal incentive or motivation to actually, you have to let that come across, all right? Because there has to be some motivation for you to want to have this degree. It's not as easy to explain it now during COVID, when there are more allowances for students to come in without things like the GREs, without other, examinations. You have to make yourself stand out. Okay. The other thing that I would encourage students to do, because there are a lot of people who are really wondering if the investment to grad school is worth it now when everything is online. And it's a very, very important decision for you to make. It's up to each individual person to make that decision for themselves. If you're going to go into something that's tech related, it's not that much of a difference for you to work online or to work in a classroom, because you're working on the computer either way. However, the law school experience, the MPH experience, the business school experience, all of it, all of these internships that are being held now online instead of in front of you for credit, those are decisions that students should make for themselves. I do very strongly encourage students to work with their career centers and their advisors to secure internships this year, because that's really where the experiential thing will come through, and you can confirm, it helps you reaffirm that this is really your passion, especially for those who will say were encouraged by their advisors freshman or sophomore year to pick a major that's phasing out now during COVID, all right? Or individuals who are thinking of coming back to school who aren't sure yet, okay, whether it's right for them, whether the investment is worth it right now. And so there's kind of a schism between whether to do it because it's the right time, they're not working, so school is a good option right now, it's a good transitional thing for them to do right now. However, are they just filling time, or is it something that they really want to do? So I really only encourage graduate school for those who really want it, okay? And as John mentioned, for graduate school, and also Dmitry and Michael, these are people who are very passionate about what they were going into, all right? So you have to think of that. It's not just a sign of the times that, okay, well, I finished undergrad, and so I've stamped that on my bucket list, and now I'm going to grad school, and then that's the next thing on the bucket list, and I'm just gonna keep moving, all right? It's a personal decision. So it's something that you should make. You have the great benefit, which I know I didn't have in the 90s, but you have the great benefit of career centers. So I really, really encourage everyone to go to their career centers, to develop a relationship with their counselor, not just this semester when you're about to graduate, but also in the future, okay? That's why you paid all the student fees, right? Yeah, okay, so back to you, Alexandra.
Well, that goes into our next question. I mean, we're all planning to pursue these programs, and whether we work or not also plays a role. But is getting a graduate degree just as intense as the undergraduate study, or is it like having a second job? I know a lot of programs, at least for the MBA that I've been looking into, all the classes are at night. So in theory, you could work during the day, but is the course load very challenging? How should students approach that? I guess we could start with Dimitri.
I'm a few years out of the loop, to be perfectly honest. However, a lot of these programs that are at night, so I teach classes at late evening. They're still very intense. It's definitely a second job, and it's definitely not for the faint of heart to do both. But that is the best way to do it, actually. So they're not. What most students do actually space it out where they can, if the school allows them to, just to space it out over a longer period of time, and that makes sense. But going at it with, say, two or three courses as well as a full-time job is just you have no personal life for those 2 years, and if you're not prepared to do that, it's going to make it very tough.
It's definitely something to think about now that I'm hearing it from all of you guys. John, do you want to give your input?
Yeah, absolutely. I think graduate school is definitely like having a second job. I think, like Dimitri said, you have to steep yourself fully, immerse yourself in the material. You can't really, do half the work. You're not going to get your full benefit, and you're paying so much money unless you're getting a scholarship that you want to maximize the learning that you're gonna have in that short time frame. I think, like, I see my sister, she does she studies for her exam, while she had her job, and I'm like, how do you have the stamina, you know, to work full time and then to dedicate yourself to part-time schooling? So, I mean, if it was up to me, obviously you have, you know, some people have extraneous circumstances, but I would try to do full-time schooling, like to the extent you can, to just to focus on schooling. And otherwise, you're not gonna. I think you're not gonna have time for a social life as well. Like when you're at school, it's not just the academics and the reading. It's, you know, your classmates. Like I speak with people from, you know, grad school all the time. They're my friends, and it's your network. It's your base when you want to look for a job in the future. It's important that you're fully engaged in, you know, in the academic exercise, and that includes social interaction with your colleagues, and you know, that interaction is not just, you know, playing video games and watching TV. A lot of times people are thinking and talking about current events through the prism of what they're reading and studying, and that's just as much education and just as relevant as the, you know, 100-year case that you're reading. So that's my view. Yeah.
Very good
For
point.
Michael, how is it balancing a family and working and trying to get your degree?
Okay, that's humanly impossible. Prove us wrong.
No, he's doing it. Believe me.
Hey, it's a funny story because in the Columbia Sports Management program, they put on average 6 to 8 hours a week expect per course beyond just going. So when I first looked at that, I was like, come on, they don't know me, Michael Offertig. There's 6 to 8. It's probably my 3 to 4. And within the first semester, it was completely opposite. Their 6 to 8 was probably 12 to 16 hours a week. And that was a big wake up call for me, where I took my original 2 classes and put it down to 1. And I said, everybody goes at their own pace. And I'm not going to do it in, you know, 3 years. I'm going to do it in 4. I'm going to enjoy every minute of it. And so I'm completely diving into it. When I call up, because of COVID, we're not in class right now, but when I call up some of my classmates, I ask them, well, how long did you spend on this? I'm just curious. And, you know, they're telling me that the class that I'm in with them is their least work that they're putting in from their 4 classes. And I'm just like, oh boy. So I don't know if it's because I'm kind of out of it for 25 years. Although I spoke to some alumni and they're like, Coach, do you do all the reading? I'm like, yes, I do. You do all that? Yes, I do. They're like, that's why, because I'm diving into it, right? You're like, no one does all the reading. And I'm like, well, you know, I'm doing all the reading. So yes, it is a challenge. It will be probably even more challenging, which I'm looking for that challenge starting next fall when we're back, you know, when I'm traveling, you know, 2 to 3 weeks out of every month for about 6 months, right? So that will be a whole nother story there. Right now, where I'm not traveling over the weekends, at least I do get a little bit of, all right, my wife is going to take care of my son. I get my 4 hours to just focus on it, you know? So, oh yeah, it's a lot of work, but it's very fulfilling. You know, just like Dimitri and John were saying, it's very fulfilling, you know, you put into it and you're learning new things. So it's not easy if you want to do it right, but at the same time, you want to do it right, and it's very fulfilling.
I think that's very important that you guys are all very passionate about what you're doing. And even for myself, I mean, right now I'm thinking, oh, I want to pursue a higher degree, but I'm starting to think, am I really passionate about this right now? Should I wait a little bit and see if that passion changes or if it's still there in 2 years? Tamika, would you like to add anything else to this question?
I know we're all talking about grad school, and I was like thinking back to when I was getting my master's, and I was like, oh gosh, like I wouldn't want to relive it. But at the same time, like it was a worthwhile experience because it propelled me to go into my career even more and apply that master's degree in so many different aspects in my career that I didn't think was even possible, in teaching and counseling, presenting, public speaking, when I got the degree in communications. And then I did the, you know, if you're interested in doing dual degree, I mean, I was able to do my undergrad. It was my senior year when I enrolled into graduate school. So I was balancing undergrad and grad school. And then I got my degree, you know, my master's at 23. So sometimes it can be good if you want to just push in all that work, kind of like Michael says, like if you do it all now, you'll have kind of that freedom later on. But if for your style, if you want to pace it out and do something part-time and work, it all is really dependent on what you can do financially, what you can do kind of mentally as well. Thinking of mental health a little bit, like, can you really balance all of this? And what's going to be worth it for your lifestyle? So I would never tell a student, well, see what so-and-so is doing, see what they're doing. It's more of like, well, what do you really want to gain from it? What can you financially, mentally take on? And then decide your path that way, because everyone is going to have something different.
Well, it's funny that you say that, because so many people have told me, don't compare yourself to other people. Everyone goes at their own pace. And it's really so true, but it's harder, like, to just believe that and be like, oh yeah, you'll be fine, because now you're in like the stress of it. But even Chris knows, I mean, I'm stressing about everything just because my sister's on a different path than I am, and I feel like I have to be on the same path as her. But I mean, we're all different people. We all do things at a different pace. So that kind of leads me into my next question. How do you, sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. How would you recommend students to stay organized in grad school and prepare for their examinations pre-grad school? And then kind of tying it all together, how would you recommend that they prepare for interviews post-grad? I can start with Chris.
So, so preparing for, so there were a few different parts to that one. Which one do you want to start with?
We'll start with the staying organized and the test.
Okay. So I'm going to tell you, the best way to do grad school is to first leap into the chaos and then organize yourself according to what your teachers for that semester are like. And I'll tell you, a grad class is the equivalent of 2 undergrad classes. And I'll share a funny story. I didn't know this. I transitioned from St. John's University, where I was doing 21 credit semesters, to all of a sudden going to Columbia University grad school, and I had 2 advisors because it was the interdisciplinary stuff. And so they said, oh, you should take this pile of classes. And the other advisor said, you should take this pile of classes. So I signed up for all of them and took all of them at the same time because no one stopped me. Yes. So then I just kind of was forced into this universe where everything fit together, and it was beautiful because you saw like the literature courses fitting together with the philosophy course, and it would just open a new world. Okay. However, you have to let go of other stuff, other hangups, or this idea that it's going to be a 9 to 5 kind of thing, or only a 6 to 9 kind of thing. You have to allow yourself to have this schedule. And if you're not prepared for it, as Michael said, you cut down to the schedule that fits your lifestyle, because my first graduate degree was in philosophy, and I was able to do the whole degree in 1 year. My degree in literature, I had a kid, and I had a husband, and I had all of these family responsibilities at the same time, and I had to go into it, and I had also my teaching responsibilities, and my life was unfolding. So I couldn't do the degree at the same pace that I did my first one, right? And now I'm currently at Teachers College finishing my doctorate, and I'm in the 10-year track instead of the 10-year track, right? Because I'm doing it on my own pace. You have to do it. You can't have everything at the same time coming onto you, because I like the stress that I have. It's healthy stress. It keeps me going, all right? However, you have to make sure that you're distinguishing between healthy stress and then unhealthy stress, which then everything unravels. You can't stay organized. It's just, and you're not enjoying it. Like, why are you paying all this money to people if you're not enjoying the process? Okay. You're not going to pay a ticket to Great Adventures and then hate all the roller coasters, right? Grad school is like a series of roller coasters. You just have to be ready. Okay. So that's that one. What was the other part of the question?
I think you kind of answered it. The other one was the test, taking standardized tests. How would you prepare for that? And also the grad school interviews.
So the standardized testing, it depends. So if you're going for the GMATs or the LSATs, or there are very particular classes that you can take. And actually the LSAT one was very interesting. I took a couple of them because I just wanted to see what they were like and compare. They used to have Princeton Review and Kaplan, and I think Kaplan is the prevalent one right now. However, John will explain if there's a better one right now, what the trendy one is right now. Same thing for the GMATs. For the GREs, I'll tell you the truth. I worked on the content first by itself, and then I started playing timed video games, and that forced me to like get my time to a certain way. Also, for those who are taking graduate exams that have an essay component, it's good to time your essay writing skills. Okay, so if you're a fast typist, that's great, but if you're a typist who makes mistakes, that's going to bring down the score a little bit. What else? That's really it. You can also see what the colleges and universities are offering in terms of waiving the exams, because they are waiving the exams. However, FAFSA, and this is the only thing we can confirm about FAFSA right now, FAFSA is not waiving, sorry, the requirement for the entrance exam, because some FAFSA is required in order to unlock that opportunity. So it's not across the board. Some schools are allowing some kind of financial aid, and others are just kind of locking it across the board, saying, look, that's the distinguishing factor. You have to take that exam. So it just depends. But I think Tamika is well equipped to talk about that in more detail also.
Yeah, for sure. So when it comes to graduate degree programs, like I mentioned, I work with a lot of students that are going into medical and law school. So what we actually recommend, what we've been doing kind of in our center, is bringing in some of our students that have recently got accepted into medical school, and they kind of offer their tips and advice on how they prepared for MCAT. Obviously, Kaplan is one of the popular ones, and then we do the same thing for law students. So we bring in our law students, have them talk to our undergrads, and kind of give them some advice on how to prepare for the LSAT. So a lot of it is kind of leaning towards your peers, at least what we found to be helpful for students to kind of prepare, and then seeing what method works the best for them individually. But yeah, definitely check to see kind of what programs are waiving any kind of fees. And then if the university is offering courses, I know we offer an MCAT prep course Saturday mornings. The students do that for about 6 months. They have to apply to get into this program, and then they have a professor that prepares them, and they kind of do that prep. So you may want to kind of check and see what the institution is also offering for students who are preparing for these advanced degrees as well.
So you both mentioned GRE, LSAT. John, do you want to add anything about the LSAT in particular?
Sure. So I think with the LSAT, yeah, just generic advice, just, find a quiet location to focus. It's helpful if you go with other classmates to study together. It keeps your sanity, and, you stay on track. You don't become distracted as long as you're disciplined. I think it's really important to keep a healthy lifestyle and positive mindset. Anxiety is crippling, and sometimes you're like, oh my gosh, I'm not as good as my classmate, or am I gonna make it? Am I gonna make it? All those thoughts racing through your head, you're wasting energy. You just have to focus on, improvement as much as possible, and trying to stay, light in terms of your mentality. You can't get overwhelmed with obsession over doing well. You have to stay a little bit relaxed, like a golf swing, right? And then for exam courses, I recommend there's Testmasters, PowerScore, Kaplan. There's a new one called Blueprint that I took. That's a really good one in New York City. Really smart tutors with a smaller class size, and they give you more individualized attention. But at the end of the day, it's just, either the logical rules or you don't. So you could just pick it up on your own. You don't really need the courses, but I highly encourage them, because every point is a huge marginal benefit to your chances of getting into the law school. It's all just LSAT and GPA. It's a quantitative game. So you just want to maximize your shot.
Thank you. So we've mentioned a lot about maybe taking a gap year, not going straight to school if we're not ready. So I want to know, Tamika, what do you think is a good alternative, in regards to certificate programs? What is a good alternative to a master's or doctoral program, since some people might not be ready to commit to something like that?
Yeah, so you kind of want to talk a little bit about gap year then? Is that what the question was? Sorry, you were going in and out, so I didn't.
Gap year and certificate programs that we could do in the interim.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And this is a question that I get a lot from my honor students who are burnt out from doing all these honorary things. And now they're like, I know I need to go back to school, but I'm not ready quite yet. During that gap year is a great time to get that experience a little bit. So I always encourage students, whether that is volunteering, getting a part-time job, or, doing full-time work, any of those three, just to kind of get you still working and not having that, loss of education and continuous learning, because you don't want to be on vacation, let's say, for too long, and then you have to jump in and start going into that graduate program. And then it can also prepare you. That year can definitely be a soul searching kind of year, saying, do you really want to go into a graduate program, or, are you happy with kind of the work that you're doing now? And maybe you can go into the workforce for a little bit, and then maybe have your employer kind of pay for your schooling. I know a lot of students like that option, especially if they're wanting to pursue MBAs. I've heard that a lot. And so the certificate programs, I think it's a great option. Like I said, anytime you can do continuous learning during that time, learning about yourself, learning about your options is always going to be a benefit to you in the long run, whether that is while you're in school or while you take some time off before you prepare for those graduate programs, or if you decide not to in the end.
Chris, do you want to give some input on the same question about the certificate programs?
So actually, I agree with what Tamika said. I guess to that, I would add a lot of people are using the affiliate resource that we have, New Skills Academy, through Philo for Thought, which is giving an 87% discount on a lot of very nice professional certification courses. You can choose between that if you're an online learner and you found that it's easy to learn online, or if you prefer to have that sort of camaraderie that comes with being part of a campus environment, look and see what certification programs are available at your campuses, all right? You should really, especially if it's an advanced certification program, you should really look for something that will allow you that peer mentoring factor. It's something that will connect with you in terms of, what do I want to call it? You'll connect with the other people, not just on the level of being students, but also that commiseration of being working individuals, like professionals, and then also juggling that school and work life kind of experience. If you pick the right program and the right certification and the right environment for yourself, grad school actually allows you to build a kind of second family of peers. Okay, so you have your professional pareja, which is one of the things that we stress the importance of at Philo for Thought. So it's, for me, that's what, if I was going to go for a certification program and I didn't really need to add to my professional pareja, I would just take the New Skills Academy course because it's easy. I can do it on my time, and there's no one telling me, oh, it's a timed exam or whatever. You're doing it on your own time as it is convenient for you. Whereas some of the classes offered through colleges and universities are not asynchronous, and you have to sort of check in at certain times and make sure that you're doing what the professor needs. You have to be part of the student think tanks and all that other stuff, which is really fun. I loved my grad school experience. I would never, give away or trade up any part of that. However, if it's not right for you, again, and I'll keep going back to it, if it's not right for you and you're more an online learner and this past few months have been great for you, then go for something that's a lot more affordable and doesn't involve the aspects of learning that don't mesh for you.
Thank you for that. I think we've answered all the questions that I've prepared in some way or form. Do any of our participants have any questions for the speakers? If you do, you can put them in the chat, and we'll slowly reconvene with the other group.
I think they have like 30 seconds to it's going to automatically come back on.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you all for your information. It's given me a lot to think about as I was going to put in applications next week. Now I'm thinking maybe I should wait a little bit longer to figure out what I want to do. But I guess a question for Dimitri of my own would be, a lot of the schools that I'm looking at, some of them do require work experience, some of them don't. Would that make me less marketable as a applicant, not having as much work experience as somebody else?
Yeah, unfortunately, yes. And it's done for a couple of reasons. I mean, the straight up reason is the schools want you to be able to work at a much more practical and higher level because you've had some experience. The other is they want connections and the ability to tie in to your employer and your background, and the more cynical sort of explanation. But it's unfortunate, but absolutely true. Someone that has more experience will be a more, desirable candidate for them. Unfortunately, for those that don't have experience, I guess.
Thank you. So now I think we're all back together, and I will pass the mic to Andy, the virtual mic.
We want to thank you all for. All right, everyone. So good morning. Thank you so much again for investing your time with us on a Saturday morning. It's a huge commitment. So today we obviously have a panel on the advanced degree programs. And so we'll be hearing from our STEM panelists. For those that make up the audience, feel free to type in the chat if you have any questions throughout the program. Dr. Kusamalis, we'll begin with you if you don't mind. Perfect. So I guess one of the first questions that is pertinent to students who are interested in going to medical school is when they should apply to medical school, and more specifically, when they can determine when they're competitive and ready.
Wow, that's a loaded question. Thank you. I think that's one that's asked very, very often. I think what's really important for pre-meds to know is what they need to take in terms of their pre-med requirements and when they can take the MCAT. So I think it's really important to advise a pre-med student early on that what they need to take. So for example, they need biology, they need organic chemistry, they need general chemistry, they need physics. So I think they need to be advised in their first year, because if you don't double up, you're never ready junior year to take the MCAT. You don't have everything under your belt at that point. So I think that's one of the key points, that if you really want to go straight through from college to med school and not take a gap year, you really need to double up at one point, whether it's physics with chemistry, physics with organic. And I think that once you take everything that's required and take your MCAT, I think what's really critical is your grades. I know people say this all the time, but the numbers really matter, right? Because if you don't have the grades, and the grades are getting a lot harder to attain these days, it seems like it's gotten much harder to even get into medical school. I definitely think I would not have gotten it if I was competing with you guys, that's for sure. But I just feel like the grade point average, it used to be like 3.4 or 3.6 back in 2005 when I was mentoring students, is now closer to like a 3.7, 3.8, 3.9, and extracurricular activities. So to answer your question, I think you need to have all of your pre-med requirements done, your MCAT done, your grades matter for both. And then a sprinkle of extracurricular activities, of course, doing something in research, but sometimes there's just not enough hours in the day, right? To be able to like take all the requirements, excel in the requirements, and, have these, when are you really going to go to the lab and, get to be first author on a patient? It's impossible, right? So a lot of times kids do that during their gap year. Sometimes they go to Memorial for a year, sometimes they go to a hospital for 2 years, and then they get their name on a paper. But I think one of the most important things is your grades, your MCAT scores, and knowing early on what you need, because otherwise you're just behind the 8 ball and you have to take a gap year because you can't take everything in time.
Right. I know, speaking from personal experience, there were several semesters where I just had to double up on sciences. I remember having to take physics 1 and organic chemistry at the same time, and that's just,
So painful.
it's definitely an uphill battle. So I definitely think that it's a great idea to kind of just create a roadmap for yourself your freshman year and just work off of that. Allow yourself to space everything out, so that not only gives you time, but it allows you to succeed at the same time.
And I really think taking a gap year is not like so taboo like it was with me. So I graduated from Barnard in 1983, and I think I was one of the few people that did a gap year. Like the really smart girls just went right in, right? They had their grades, they had the MCATs done. I guess I wasn't one of those. So I ended up doing research for 3 years, and I did get to be on a paper, and I did get into medical school. I think if you have drive, you'll get where you need to be, and you don't need to be with the masses, and it's okay to do a gap year. And I actually think it gives you more dimension as a student, and you become an interesting candidate to interview. And depending on what you do, whether you get clinical experience at a doctor's office like you're doing with Dr. Leah Case, I think that's invaluable. And I think having mentors like Dr. Leah Case are huge, right? Because I think mentorship is what it's all about. And I really want some of the young kids from the Hellenic Medical Society to join your group at Philo for Thought. I really think we have like an amazing group that I think if we join forces will be even more powerful to get the message out.
I definitely agree. And I know that you touched briefly upon the fact that taking a gap year has now become the norm. And that's something that I've found working with medical students in the past. And I guess this leads me to my next question, which obviously you want to bolster your application up as much as possible just so that it appeals to admissions committees. And if you are taking a gap year, the biggest question is always, what should I do during that free time? So I know that you mentioned that there's opportunities such as shadowing, potentially doing research. So what are some extracurricular activities you believe undergrads should pursue? And is that something that like, should research always be pursued, or should that be something that should be pursued only if you're interested in it? What is your advice on that?
So having been on an admissions committee at New York Medical College for about 4 years, probably from 2009 to 2012, something like that. So it has been a while since I've been on an admissions committee, so I don't really know if things have changed. But I think during your gap year, I think what's really important for the medical admissions committee to see is that you can handle the work of the medical school class. And you know, being in med school is very rigorous, right? There is an inordinate amount of work. Sometimes what we recommend is that you do a 1-year master's program and excel. So say, you know, your grade point average is like 3.5, 3.6, you're kind of teetering, you don't quite know if you might squeak in if you get good MCAT scores, right? I think showing the admissions committee that you can do the work now. So taking a master's for a year, doing a master's, or perhaps just taking, you know, biochemistry or physiology, or taking classes where you'll really show them that you're able to get an A and be able to shadow, because then you can talk about your clinical experiences and what you've seen. And then, you know, one of the questions I would probably ask you is, you know, what was your most interesting case, you know, working at, you know, the family practice doctor's office, you know, what was your most challenging case? What was the scariest case? You know, so that could really lead to a very interesting interview, right? Where you really get to show who you are. And I think coming across as an individual and someone who's really interesting and different is very, very important.
Yeah, and that's an interesting point that you just brought up. Definitely focusing on getting that A first in that coursework, taking those challenging science courses, because that ultimately comes first. There's a lot of students who get lost in their extracurricular opportunities and then see that they're now suffering in the classroom. So I guess one can't be sacrificed for the other, and I think that's an important point for most pre-meds to know.
Yeah.
So thank you for making that clear.
Mhm.
And moving on to our next question, the MCAT remains like as to be one of the biggest hurdles for most pre-meds. And I guess we're all wondering today, what is what is a piece of really helpful advice that you could offer to someone that's potentially preparing for it? I know the exams changed drastically in the recent years, but I guess good study habits always remain. They're timeless.
So having not done the MCAT for many years, what I did was I reached out to one of the young women that just took the MCAT last year. So the girl that's shadowing me now is Sarah. So I said, oh my goodness, I'm getting asked this question. Please give me the scoop. What's the latest about this? When I was taking the MCAT, it was all about taking the Kaplan course. It seems now, though, that there's so much stuff online, is what Sarah was telling me, that there's a lot of just free information, so you don't have to sign up for that $2,000 course. I know there's a Magoosh online MCAT prep and practice that she recommended. I don't know anything about that, but she really felt that that was very helpful. And, you know, having two girls that are in college myself, with my second girl, with Victoria, she ended up finding a lot of stuff online just for her SAT. So we didn't end up paying as much as we paid from my older girl with that, you know, one-to-one prep type of class. So there's a lot of online stuff that's free. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I definitely went and tried to locate all those resources. It just gets to a point sometimes where you feel that there's so much out there and you don't know which ones to utilize. But yeah, it's definitely very wise to utilize all those online resources. The costs of some of these tutoring services are very expensive, so a lot of pre-meds, I assume, face harsh financial realities. So it's good to have all these resources at your disposal.
Yeah, perhaps seeing if you have a weakness in something, maybe you can get, like, say physics isn't your thing, you know, maybe honing in on what you're weakest at and maybe getting someone to like sit with you and learn that. But it's not going to cost you an inordinate amount of money where you're paying for these prep classes for the whole thing. A lot of the online class, the questions are actually online, which is great. Wasn't the case when I was taking the exam.
So now moving to our fourth question. During one of our previous conversations, you mentioned that there are a lot of different interview formats that are used now to interview medical students for admissions. You previously mentioned the MMI format. And so previously having served on admissions committees, are there questions that you have found that are commonly asked? And how would you suggest that one can prepare without sounding rehearsed the day of the interview? I feel that that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. So I was on the admissions committee at New York Medical College until they implemented the multiple mini interviews. So when they implemented those, I would need to give up an entire day, and I needed to pick up my kids by 2. So I wasn't able to stay for that, but I do know a lot about the multiple mini interview process. So when I was doing it, there were only 2 interviewers, and if you didn't really luck out with one of your interviewers, it really wasn't fair, right? After you had worked so hard and you were finally able to get in the doors of the medical school to be granted an unfair interview. So what they felt was this program was actually implemented in Canada, but embraced by a lot of the medical schools in the US, but not all of them. They felt that we wanted to decrease the bias in the interview process. And they felt that if you had perhaps 6 to 10 stations where you're asked different questions, if you bombed it in 1 or 2 of the sections, you had 5 sections or 10 sections or 8 sections to make it up. And they felt that they would get a better understanding of the person you are. So some of the questions, like some of the breakout formats might be just, you know, they'll give you a question, you have 2 or 3 minutes to read it, and then it might just be an interview in one of the sessions. And then in the second session, it might be seeing an actor that's in pain and, you know, rehearsing a scenario as if they were having, I don't know, an appendicitis attack. And you have to either interview the actor and there's a camera that watches you and how you do, and then you get scrutinized on that. And then sometimes there are ethical questions, like, you know, you were with the other medical student and the other medical student dropped, you know, the tube of blood and never reported it to the lab, or, you know, it did something unethical, like how would you respond to that? Or what would you do for that? Or what was the most challenging case you had, you know, in college, you know, with a friend something that was unethical that someone tried to, bring you into, and then people see how you respond to those really intense questions.
Yeah, I've heard a lot of stories about the multiple mini interviews, and I think the most interesting part about it is the fact that there's a wide range of topics. So you're really given questions that are very different from one another, and that the people interviewing you can either be professors, doctors, students. So I find that mix is very, very interesting as well. Would you say you have to approach a student differently than you would with the professor, or?
I think being true to yourself and being who you are with whoever interviews you, I think that's just key. Just be wholesome and be who you are, answer honestly, and I think that behooves you. There's also a lot of information online on how to crush the MMI. So there's someone that actually goes on and talks to you about that. So there's a lot of information online to do that.
Perfect. So just gonna move to the final question now, and then we'll wait and see if anyone has any questions that they would want to write in the chat. But this will be with respect to the personal statements. So this is another part that trumps many pre-med students. How would you suggest that they find a unique angle when they're writing, staying on topic, and also doing a lot of show and not tell? And what should the revision process look like? How do you think a student should get to a final draft?
Wow, that's a really loaded question, but it is one that's asked all the time. I think it's just really hard to be given a yellow pad or computer screen with a white blank page and have to tell the medical school who you are, right? I mean, that's just such a daunting task. Like, where do you start with that? But I think just talk about your unique story. Like, I don't know anything about you. So as an interviewer, like, I would love to know about you. I mean, you're giving your time on a Saturday morning to help others. Like, that intrigues me about you. Like, I would love to hear this feel for thought in your essay, for example, because this is something that you do above and beyond someone else. So that gives you an interesting angle. Like, you're applying now, you should be just taking care of yourself, and you're unselfishly giving of your time. And I think that's an important piece. Just talking about who you are, about your background, what got you here, what interest, what prompted your interest in medicine, perhaps. And everyone has a different story. Some people are better writers than others. Give it to a couple of people, but don't obsess about it. That's the big point I want to tell you. Just make it happen and just get it off your docket. It doesn't matter. We read hundreds of them. Sometimes I'm given 3 minutes to just quickly skim over it. So it's not like I'm reading every fine detail. Start with a very interesting, catchy first paragraph and last paragraph. I think that the middle isn't as important as capturing your interviewer's attention, because we get 3 minutes sometimes to just skim over them.
Right, and as you mentioned previously when we spoke on the phone the other day, don't delay applying. So don't let the personal statement get in the way of applying right away. Yes. That was super important.
Yeah, definitely. Since it is a rolling admissions process, I had a friend who was so paralyzed by writing the essay, paralyzed, absolutely paralyzed. And he was a brilliant star from Cornell, excellent grade point average, excellent MCAT scores. The MCAT, personal statement, he handed in at the very last date. So instead of giving it in July, he gave it in, I think, sometime in October. So this guy would have gotten in anywhere. The sky was the limit. And I mean, he ended up getting into Stony Brook. He's an ER doc now. He's exceedingly successful, but I just feel like he would have had so many more choices. So don't get paralyzed by the essay.
All right. So thank you so much for your time, Dr. Chrysomales. That concludes the questions that I have for you today. However, we could get questions in the chat. So should they appear, we'll let you know. We're gonna now move on to Michael. Hi, Michael. Thanks for being with us today. So I'm gonna start with our first question for you today. And that will be, how did you know that biomedical engineering was the right degree path for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when I first entered my undergraduate, I didn't really know what I wanted to do at that point. And I thought I wanted to pursue pre-med, but I had a life experience midway through, and it was just kind of completely changed my course during my university studies. So as a pre-med, while I was studying biology, my grandfather passed away, and that kind of was like an experience for me, and I took it really personally. And he passed away because of cancer, and that kind of forced me to kind of like look at what I was doing and how I was going to be changing people's lives. And while pre-med is definitely a way to do that, and going into medical school is a way to do that, I wanted to do that more broadly. And I found that biomedical engineering was something that I could do in order to affect multiple lives by creating potentially therapies that are going to be used in the clinical setting. And so that's what forced me to, or I guess that's what allowed me to change into biomedical engineering and pursue that pathway.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that story. It's always great to hear someone lead with, purpose.
Sure thing.
So for our second question, what careers are open to biomedical engineering graduates after they complete their degree?
Yeah. The great thing about biomedical engineering is that it really touches a lot of different fields throughout your studies. So you're going to take classes that are going to be a little bit touching on electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and even chemical engineering. So coming out with a biomedical engineering degree really allows you to kind of look at different fields, and kind of, I think, opens up many doors for you if you do pursue that route. So there are going to be a lot of different fields that you can study. If you want to work in industry, you can be process engineer, you can be quality control, you can work on pharmaceuticals, and there's just, I think, limitless opportunities when you study biomedical engineering. Although it's good to know while you're studying biomedical engineering specifically what you do want to do and where you want to end up, because that'll allow you to kind of focus on specific topics in biomedical engineering that will ultimately get you closer to that industry position, or if you decide to go to professional school, into that school.
Right. And I guess because biomedical engineering seems so broad to me, with these specialties within the field, is there a particular type of training that you might have to pursue if you want to go into a certain specialty? Like, or do your courses have to change? What is that like? Do you mind?
Yeah, so I think it depends mostly on the school that you're going to be going to. That's going to dictate what tracks or specialties are available under biomedical engineering. And for me, I decided that I want to work primarily in pharmaceuticals and developing therapies for patients. So I did biomolecular engineering, and now I specifically focus on immunotherapies. But as a biomedical engineering, under that field, there are different sections that you can focus on. Like if you prefer imaging, ways to develop imaging techniques for example, for X-ray imagings or microscopy and that sort of thing, you can focus on the imaging track. If you want to do the pharmaceutical track, you can do biomolecular engineering. So it's really important to kind of get an idea of what you do want to do after graduating that will allow you to kind of focus on that under your biomedical engineering degree, and focus on that specialty in particular, which is ultimately going to have an effect on what classes that you're going to be allowed to take and what electives you'll be allowed to take.
Right. And I also assume what kind of research then you end up getting to pursue. And I guess through looking at your LinkedIn before we got a biography from you, that's all I had. I clicked on it and I was viewing your profile, and I got to see a whole list of publications. And so this kind of ties in with my next question, which is, are biomedical engineering students and professionals strongly encouraged to participate in research? And as an undergrad or as a transitioning professional, what do you think is the most helpful tip for potentially approaching a principal investigator and applying to research positions?
Yeah, definitely. Pursuing research isn't a requirement. For me, it was personally something that I was passionate about, and that's something that I really wanted to pursue. So that's kind of why I focused on research and had the opportunity to, as an undergraduate, to pursue research, to publish, and then to go on to graduate school and continue down that path. I think as an undergraduate, it's important to, if you do want to do research and if you are looking into medical school or any other professional school like graduate school, I think that starting research early is important because that's ultimately what's going to, I think it's going to show that you're able, like Dr. Crisomales was mentioning early, it's going to show that you're a well-rounded individual and you can actually go do multiple things, not only maintain those grade point averages, but also do things that are potentially going to have an effect by publishing actual research that you're doing. So it's not a requirement to do that by any means, but if it is something that you are passionate about, I think that is important to kind of early on speak to investigators whose research that you're interested in and talk to them about potentially working in their lab. I know initially it might be like a volunteer position, but there are summer research opportunities that do pay and that you can kind of showcase that you are able to do research over the summer. I mean, maybe it's not ideal, but a lot of students are doing that these days. So over the summer, do research and really should get a strong recommendation letter from that investigator if further schooling is going to be something that you're going to pursue. But I think in as a biomedical engineer and basically any field that you're going to be studying in, as an undergraduate, you're going to have classes with professors that do have some interest towards what your interests are. So talking to them and kind of letting them know that, hey, I want to do research. Is it a possibility to do that in your lab? I think many are going to be very open about that. And they're going to say that, yeah, we can use an extra set of hands. And you can work your way up in terms of how experienced you are in that particular research subject.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the final question now, which is, what is the most helpful tip that you have for the audience today in terms of preparing for grad school interviews?
Sure, yeah. Like medical school, grad school is also very similar. And I think that one of the most important tips that I can offer is just to kind of start early. It's going back to your previous question, you know, being able to do research on a subject that you're very interested in will showcase in your application process as you're writing your personal statement. It's going to showcase throughout your application that research and grad school is something that you're capable of pursuing and that you're truly passionate about. So getting started early in that process is going to be critical. I don't know if many grad schools are rolling admission. The ones I applied to, they were not rolling admission. So applying early doesn't necessarily mean it's going to give you a better chance, but just working on your application early, working on your personal statement early, and just kind of writing it out one day. It might not be perfect, and then just spending a few days kind of going back to it, resting a little bit and editing it afterwards after you have it for a few days is really powerful tool when you're just writing something. I know that's pretty effective for me. So it helps you kind of gives a different perspective on how you're looking at that particular block of text. And I think another tip I can provide is that it's really important that you're applying to schools that you are actually interested in terms of like their research, and being able to showcase that like by talking to, maybe emailing professors and saying like, hey, you know, I'm considering applying to this program. I find your research is really interesting. Maybe talking to them to kind of get to know them a little bit more if that's an potential investigator that you want to work for or work with, and just kind of getting a better sense of why you're interested in that school. I think that'll be pretty helpful as well. It's not a requirement. It's not necessarily, that's not going to mean that it's going to help your chances of getting in, but it shows that you're actually interested and that you're actually, I guess, interested with the specific person. And in the application process, I think that's going to really shine through, just showcasing why you're interested in that school, because some of the questions that get asked during the application is like, why do you choose our school? You know, what sets our school apart for you? And being able to really describe that is going to be important, because you have 100 other applicants, if not more, that are saying the same thing. And ultimately, it's like being able to outshine those people is going to be really critical. So I think just working on the application early is going to be really helpful in getting that through.
Yeah, and carefully thinking through all the components of the application, it sounds like is super important to
Right.
get yourself for the interview. Thank you, Michael. We really value your insight. We're now going to move on to Elpida. So for our first question, in the process of applying to MPH programs, what would you recommend to help your application stand out to admissions committees?
So I've applied to school many times now, undergrad, grad school, law school. And I think the one thing that unequivocally always helps me was to get to know people in admissions. So when I was applying to my MPH programs, I went to about 4 or 5 grad school fairs, and I got to know the people who were representing the schools were the same people at every fair. So, you know, by the 3rd time we knew each other by first name. So that was very helpful for me because it gave me that personal connection. And I honestly, I didn't even have a reason to go to a grad school fair for the 4th time in a row. I just went for that purpose to get to know those people better. I would just stop by their table, say hi, maybe ask a question, but really I just wanted to form those personal connections with them. So then I would follow up with them with a very short email like, hi, it was really nice to see you again. Hope the grad school touring is really well. I hope I can come and visit the grad school in person sometime. And then I would do that. So for example, every time I was in New York, I would find some excuse to go up to the Columbia campus. I wanted to check on my application. I wanted to visit a classroom. I just wanted to talk to someone in admissions. So when my application landed on that review desk, I wasn't just another name. They knew who I was. And for, I think, someone like me, the truth is I didn't have the most competitive grades in undergrad, partly because I was a STEM major, and STEM is just so hard and they try to weed you out and you're being graded on a curve. So I knew that that was maybe a weaker point in my application, so I had to focus my efforts elsewhere. So building those personal connections was very valuable because they were like, oh, okay, maybe she doesn't have the most competitive transcript, but she is so dedicated, she's so interested, she really wants to come to this school because she, unlike other students who might have better grades than her, is really making the effort to let us know she wants to come here. So I made sure to like really know these programs in and out, know what professors were doing, know what kind of research what they were doing, and be really armed with a good amount of knowledge so I could sell myself when I was talking to these people, but in the most natural way possible. So I'd be like, oh, I saw your program does food policy, and I love food policy because I love to cook, and I saw one of your professors there does research there. It would be so exciting if I could come to Columbia and do research with that professor. So really, I think the takeaway was being able to form those personal connections was very helpful for me because I got into, I think I applied to 15 grad school programs and I got into all of them because I made sure to really know the people in admissions. And I did that in undergrad and I did that for law school. And, you know, you kind of basically make them interview you in a, like you don't have an interview set up, but these like small 10-15 minute interactions is an opportunity for you to showcase yourself and tell them why you are a good fit. Tell them why you're more than just words on a paper.
Wow, that's some really great piece of advice. And I feel like most undergrads will shy away from making those connections simply because it is truly difficult, speaking from personal experience, just to, you know, approach a professional, not only because they're older than you, but at times they might be intimidating because they're, what's the word? They're they've done so well in their career, and they're just intimidating because of that fact. So I think it's super important to make those connections, because like you said, when your application got to that desk, you weren't just a name. You know, they knew who you were, and yeah, thank you for that.
Absolutely. And I think just to add on that, that it's important to put yourself out of your comfort zone, because it pays off in the end. And my one like little tip was to kind of order the schools by from least to most interested. So the schools that I was least interested, I could use that as practice. So by the time I got to the schools that I really wanted to go to, I had the game down. I knew what to say, what sounded good, what didn't sound good. So figuring that out is really important.
Yeah, and I guess also speaking from personal experience, again, the couple of times that I have built up the courage to approach someone, a professional, they've ended up becoming invaluable mentors to me. So again, just very super important to make those connections. And so for our second question, what is good to research about a graduate program beforehand? I know that you touched upon that already, but maybe if you could expand on that point, like what are specific things that I should look at if I'm going to a program's webpage, what should I locate, and what questions should I ask myself?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one thing that's really important is seeing what internship opportunities are available to students, because in most graduate programs, you're required to do an internship between your first and your second year. At least my MPH program was like that because it was a 2-year program. And just kind of seeing where students are placed, what kind of work experience they're getting. And the 2 ways to do that is, first of all, speaking with someone in admissions. So that's just an extra question you can ask someone. And the second one is actually reaching out to students directly. And one way I did this is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a fantastic resource. I think it's really underused because people don't understand the power of LinkedIn. But one thing that you can do, which is really simple, is you can go into the search bar and type, Columbia University School of Public Health, and you'll get all the students that are there currently or were alumni, and just go through the LinkedIn page and see if there is something that pops out on their LinkedIn page that is really interesting to you. You can send them a really short message, 6 sentences. Hey, I'm a student who's thinking of going here. I saw you worked at blah, blah, blah. I'd be really interested in talking to you for 10 or 15 minutes. More often than not, people will say yes. And that gives you a more personal and understanding and a student perspective of what those internships were like. And then I think the second thing that's good to know is what classes are in the program that you are applying to, and comparing that between the schools that you want to go to. That can be very helpful in the decision-making process when you get your offers. And good grad school programs have amazing opportunities. For me, one class I took was a consulting workshop, and I worked with 6 other students and a professor as consultants for a healthcare company in New York City. And that was a really good experience because it gave me a very hands-on point of view of what a consulting lifestyle is like. And then also you want to, I think the third thing that's important in deciding and kind of researching these programs is seeing the area that you'll be in. And is this a place that you want to be in during your grad school program? Grad school is very different from undergrad because you have people from all walks of life. Some people are straight out of undergrad. Some people have taken 5-10 years off. There are people who are in relationships, people who are married, people with kids, people who are pregnant. It's no longer like college where everyone is the same age and you're living in a dorm together and you see each other every day. And undoubtedly you're going to make friends in your grad school program, but you want to think, is this a place that I want to be when I'm not studying for school? Because you're not going to be doing schoolwork all the time. And, aside from the just enjoying your life outside of grad school, you want to see if the location offers you the kind of opportunities that you want to be involved in. So, for example, Emory's School of Public Health is right next to the CDC. And that would be a great opportunity for someone who is going to Emory. They could do an internship at the CDC during the school year. So kind of balancing all those factors together can help someone make a really informed decision of where they're going to go and where they're going to spend their money getting their education.
Right, and these are all things someone has to consider before submitting their application to the to any grad program. So thank you for making us all aware of that. We're going to move on to the next question, which is a question that Dr. Chrysomalis and Michael have already answered, which is, what is the most helpful tip you can offer for preparing for a grad school interview?
Yeah, so you want to know everything on your resume in very good detail, but you want to be able to present it in a succinct manner. You don't want to keep rambling about what's on your resume and having incoherent sentences. One thing that has always helped me is to type out my answers to potential questions and type them out in the way I would speak it, and then practice that out loud, see if it sounds good, if it sounds natural, if it's succinct, and then get ready for my interviews like that. And then, they'll always ask you the typical questions. Why this school? What do you hope to achieve? Pretty standard questions. And then, of course, one thing you can do is, what I did at least, was research one or two professors that I would be interested in taking their class or doing research with. It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to end up working with this professor, but kind of being able to throw that into your interview and showing the interviewer that you you took that extra step, you did a little more research than other people, to really showcase your personal interest in this particular graduate program that you're interviewing for, will make you stand out from other applicants.
Great. This is another question that I have. This is a personal question that I'd like answered, if you don't mind answering it. What careers are open to graduates after they complete their degree? I know the MPH allows you to pursue a lot of different opportunities. So if you wouldn't mind listing out some of them, that I think the audience would benefit from that as well.
Yeah, so the MPHs specifically, the one great thing about them is that they're very diverse. So you can really do a wide range of jobs. First of all, it depends what you concentrate in. If you're doing epidemiology, you're probably going to end up doing a different job than someone who did health policy and management like I did. For me, people who are in health policy and management, the two most common jobs were consulting or working in healthcare administration. They're both really good careers. They pay well, the hours are reasonable, and you get to interact with the healthcare system in a very, I think, like baseline kind of way. That's where at least that's what I see health policy like. You're building the healthcare system up. You can have international careers with public health, which I think is amazing. I have friends from grad school who are living, all across the world. They work for the WHO, the CDC. I have a friend right now who just went to Mozambique and he's working there for the next year. So public health programs are very, very diverse. I'm obviously a little different than my classmates because I went to law school. But for me, having the MPH and the JD background will let me work in the policy and the legal field in the healthcare space once I graduate.
Yeah, I mean, I've been suggested to pursue an MPH as well, given that I'll have to take a gap year before applying to med school. And so I definitely understand why that's something that people recommend, because there's just so many things that you can do with the degree, and it's great to see that it has that potential.
Yeah, and actually, I had a couple of pre-med classmates who were applying to med school, and the beneficial thing about the MPH was, other than the added education, it also gave them that opportunity to do research, which was mentioned earlier, that having the research and having your name on a publication really helps boost your resume for your med school applications.
Great. And I think it's also admirable that you're pursuing a law degree now. How are you choosing to combine the two?
Yeah. First of all, I love law school. Some people complain that law school is too busy or too time consuming or too hard. And it definitely is busy, but I really enjoy the classes I'm taking, the material I'm learning. And for someone like me who wants to work in the healthcare space, having this added level or this extra knowledge of a legal background is going to allow me to do a lot more in the healthcare space than just an MPH would. That's not to say that you need to have an MPH and a JD to work in health policy and health law, but I really want to work in healthcare reform, health law formation. So having that law background will allow me to be one of those people who makes policy, who makes law, who works in the healthcare reform space at the like very baseline legal level. So that's why I wanted to combine my public health background with a legal degree.
That sounds very fulfilling. Best of luck with that. So at this time, we've concluded the questions, the preset questions. But if anyone from the audience has a question that they'd like to ask one of the speakers from today, you can go ahead and do that now. We'll give a couple of minutes. Okay, we just got one from Anastasia, and they're both for Dr. Chrysomalis. So the first one being, how do you suggest including experiences on your medical school applications, especially if you've been stuck with the same experiences for several years?
I think just telling, just putting it in your application and saying where you've been. I mean, I don't really understand what you mean about being stuck with the same experience. I guess, you know, sometimes you can end up being in a place a little bit longer than you anticipated. So for example, I wanted to do research for 2 years. I wasn't planning to take a third year, but I was so into the research at the time, and then it would mean my name getting on the publication if I stayed the extra 6 months. So I ended up losing another year. So I kind of understand what you're saying about being stuck. I think you just have to be honest and say, you know, that you've been doing, you know, whatever it is, whether it's shadowing a physician or in research. I think you just have to include it. And when asked on the interview, just be honest and say, you know, you weren't planning on being there, but you were, you know, maybe not stuck there, but you ended up staying there to advance your knowledge about whatever. You can turn it into a positive.
Yeah, as a pre-med student myself, I wouldn't necessarily use the word stuck. I would say the longer that you're there, it gives you opportunities to speak more about that opportunity. So if you've shadowed for 2 years, that's definitely more of that's a better experience than if you shadowed very briefly, maybe for a month or two. Or if you've stuck on a research team, if you've stayed longer, that gives you an opportunity to maybe be a part of a publication, whereas only being at a lab for a couple of months wouldn't necessarily give you the opportunity to do that. There's also another question, which is, how would you navigate shadowing opportunities during the pandemic, especially for students during their gap year?
Alexandra, this is such an excellent question. My friend actually has 2 daughters that are applying to med school now, and this is one of their biggest problems, right? How does one get to shadow during a pandemic when the doctors themselves have closed their practices? For example, I do women's wellness, so I do annual exams on women, and I closed my practice for 4.5 months. So it's ridiculously hard to imagine how a student can possibly get a true shadowing opportunity with a physician when the physician's doctor's offices were closed. Things are definitely changing now. Things are opening up for sure. And I think once everyone gets vaccinated, or most people get vaccinated, there is a much bigger comfort level in having students be shadowing the physicians. This has also gotten much more difficult for students because of the HIPAA regulations. So years ago, back in the 80s and the 90s, We were able to shadow people. We were able to work in doctors' offices and just hold their trays and learn stuff. But now, because of HIPAA, and it's just hard to have extra people that are not employed by the physician's office to be part of the opportunities. There are opportunities, however, on online, and I think some of the students during the pandemic have been helping out with, obtaining research data, for, COVID, for example. So my friend's daughters were doing research, helping research scientists with numbers. So polling people and asking them questions and then getting back, whether it's, questions about, COVID long haulers or, other things. So they were able to accrue data, and, that ultimately became part of the paper. So, they helped out in that way, but the true shadowing opportunities are very difficult. So your question is really excellent. I think it's getting better though.
Michael just wrote that computational heavy research is also a possibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also recently become aware of the fact that there are now virtual shadowing opportunities. I'm not sure how that works, but that's definitely a thing now. So I can share that opportunity with you, Anastasia. Does anyone else have any questions at this time? Just give another minute for that, just in case someone's typing up a question. Okay, so there doesn't seem to be any more questions. So I guess this will conclude the STEM panel, and it also seems like the humanities panel is wrapping up. So we'll be moving back to the main room shortly for the closing remarks. Thanks again to all the speakers for your wonderful insight. It's truly been invaluable. And yep, so we'll be heading back to the main room shortly. Thank you.
Congratulations for an amazing conference. You guys are incredible. I would love to invite some of our students to join your group, and I think we need to join forces. So I'm going to definitely be more actively involved with your group and bring a whole tribe of young people that will really benefit from all of your experiences. You guys were all amazing.
Thank you. You guys were all amazing as well. It was truly an honor to have you.
I just wanted to ask, for those that are participating, do you happen to know what you want to do after graduating? Does everyone have an idea? There's still plenty of time, so no worries. Yeah. Now, hopefully, the answers provided today will be helpful.
Cynthia just mentioned that she'd like to pursue an MD and PhD.
Yeah, I think that's a very common path to take. I have some friends that went down that path.
I currently have a student that's working on a 2-year accelerated MPH program in a year, because I didn't think shadowing in my office was good enough for her to boost her application. So I think she got a 4.0 the first semester. And I think that, if she needs to apply to med school again, because it was a very competitive year this year, showing that she's done that is huge. And she also wants to do things globally. And I think with an MPH program, you can take, you can take your medical knowledge and really change things globally, And I love that you have an MPH and a JD, working on a JD. I think that the amount of change that you can potentially do, knowing the health side, having a physiology background, knowing the medicine and the science, and then also having a law degree gives you such an angle that a lot of people won't have. So you'll be able to speak to the lawyers and speak their language. And then you'll be able to speak to the doctors and the research scientists and speak to their language. And you'll be in such a good place, really. And I really can't wait to see what you all do. But I think it's great when someone has a niche. I think that's my big thing. When you have a niche, right? If you're the biomedical engineer that knows about immunology, and I have no idea what you're talking about with your nanomolecules, well, you're going to be the man, right? You're going to be the guy that we want to interview. You're going to be the guy that we want to speak to. So you'll be the Fauci of years to come, or maybe something even better than the Fauci of years to come. But I just always say that to whomever I'm mentoring, a niche. Be able to be that one person that knows so much about a small area of interest that the others don't know that much about, or combining different things, an MPH and an MD and a JD, or just a biomedical engineer. Like, engineers have a different kind of mind, and then being able to talk medicine to the engineers, and it's just, and then the potential is incredible with the immunology, needless to say.
In general, the fields are becoming very multidisciplinary, so it's very important to kind of talk to everyone and be able to kind of understand what is being said. So that's a good suggestion. And I feel that any kind of opportunity that is given to you, you take, right? Whether it's shadowing in the OBGYN's office, shadowing in the family practice guys, you don't know what kind of skill sets you're going to end up learning. So I had a high school girl that I saw that kind of got bullied in high school and didn't really love school, or is brilliant, but associated kind of bullying with schoolwork. And I asked her, oh, so where are you going to go to college? Oh, where are you heading? And she said, oh, I don't really know if I want to go to college. And I thought, oh God, how are you taken off track? And I said to her,
be able to work at a much more practical and higher level because you've had some experience. The other is they want connections and the ability to tie in to your employer and your background, and the more cynical sort of explanation. But it's unfortunate, but absolutely true. Someone that has more experience will be a more desirable candidate for them, unfortunately, for those that don't have experience, I guess.
Thank you. So now I think we're all back together, and I will pass the mic to Andy, the virtual mic.
We want to thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the prepared panel discussions and that we were able to get your own questions answered by our speakers. We hope that you will join us for our next events in April and May. On April 17th, we'll be having our Net Cafe Spring Social event at 11 a.m. There will be a YouTube video that we'll post in our chat. On April 24th, we have the Philo for Thought Healthy Lifestyle event, which is also at 11 a.m. The details for that event will soon be available on our website. And on May 15th, we'll be having our symposium in Leadership and Society. Registration is currently open and free until May 1st. We'll be posting the links for all those events in the chat. We also have a featured video this month. Will we be showing that video, Alex?
I just linked it for whoever is interested. Chris, do you have anything else to add?
So the video is actually a tribute to the bicentennial for Greek independence. Oh, actually, one moment. sorry, just we're very proud. Okay, we're very proud of the legacy that we share, not just the professional legacy that we're creating now in the 21st century, but the strength of where we come from and of what makes us question. It's the spirit of being Greek that makes us question, that makes us seek out this unity and this desire to make sure we have the best possible and most reliable set of resources to our young people today. So I want to thank everyone again who participated today for our talk. I want to wish everyone participating, whether you are Greek or now officially honorary Greek, to please carry on the legacy. Don't let it stop here today with the bicentennial, but to carry on, because that's how we got here in the first place.
Thank you, Chris.
So on behalf of all of us at Philo for Thought, thank you speakers, thank you participants, and like Andi said, we hope to see you at our next events. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you all.